Hey guys, welcome back to the Mystery of the Celestial Triangle. This is Caillea, and today is part 4A, Saints, Sacrifices, and Lemurians, as we make our way from the Golden Gate of San Francisco to the Lions Gate in Vancouver. All right, leaving San Francisco, we're heading north, and our first stop is Santa Rosa, California. Santa Rosa is located at the junction of Highway 12 and US 101. One of the first things I noticed about Santa Rosa is its distinctive triangular-shaped airport right here to the northwest of town. Now, Santa Rosa is allegedly founded by Maria Lopez de Carrillo, a California ranchera, and she allegedly founded Santa Rosa and set up her own ranchera in 1833. Now, Santa Rosa gained its name from Saint Rose of Lima. Born Isabel Flores de Oliva in the city of Lima, then considered to be the viceroyalty of Peru, on April 30th, 1586, she entered the Third Order of Dominicans after refusing to marry and taking a vow of virginity. Now, the Third Order is a part of the Catholic Church and other Christian denominations that are considered lay people. So she wouldn't have been an actual nun in the Catholic Church. She was only a nun in the Third Order of Dominicans. So she did not live on the ground. She would come and go. She is best known for her continual prayer and bizarre penances that she conducted in a small grotto that she had built. She was canonized on April 12, 1671 by Pope Clement X, and then she was later, interestingly, moved to second-class status by Pope Pius XII on September 12, 1942. And if you're familiar with a lot of the research community, 1942 seems to be a very significant date. Now, there is a park dedicated to her in Sacramento that is located at 7th and K Streets. Her skull is prominently displayed in the Basilica Santa Rosa de Lima, Peru, and their crypt area. Now, the history of Santa Rosa is like many of the towns in the West. We are told that it was just this rustic Western town with shanties and shacks and tents of miners, but firsthand accounts tell us something quite different. A mere 25 years later, we read in the Sonoma Democrat on October 22nd, 1857, that Santa Rosa is comprised of a courthouse and private residences and many other buildings of imposing character, giving an air of beauty to the place that is in good keeping with the lovely scenery around the town. There are stables and stocks of horses and carriages that are not surpassed by anything of the kind in San Francisco and other large cities. But of course, just like San Francisco, Santa Rosa was destroyed in the 1906 earthquake and fire, and they lost 90% of the buildings that they had. I want to venture off just a little bit to the south and east of Santa Rosa and jump over to the Sonoma area. So Santa Rosa is located in Sonoma County, but Sonoma County is also home to the town of Sonoma, Sonoma Plaza, and the Jack London State Park. The historical record tells us that this area was organized as a mission in as early as 1823, with the mission San Francisco Solano, which was destroyed and subsequently rebuilt in 1844, and still stands today in Sonoma State Historic Park. But it was a mission/military outpost for the Mexican government from 1823 to 1846. The city was taken over on June 14, 1846 by 33 Americans in the Bear Flag Revolution, led by William Ide. Now, they took Mexican General Mariano Guadalupe Vallejo captive, and for the next 25 days, Sonoma served as the capital of the California Republic. But on July 7, 1846, the United States annexed California as a territory, and the bear flag was removed in favor of the stars and stripes. The state of California recognized the area as Sonoma County in 1850 with the organizational efforts following California's formal admission to the United States. Here is Sonoma Plaza with the Bear Flag Revolution monument in the center of it and a photograph of the mission. When we zoom in and take a closer look at the city of Sonoma, nothing really dramatic stands out until you look at it in street view. Once I switched over to map view, it became apparent that we had a definite instance of another baby in another park. And that we also had this compass or watch style shape right here pointing directly to Sonoma Plaza. So what are these areas and what do they have to do with each other? So the baby is contained in Sonoma Town Railroad Park, which is a private enterprise. It is a children's amusement park. If we look at it on the overhead with the satellite on, we will see that none of this is visible at all without street view. Now, taking a look at the other aspects that we found on the map, here is the watch or compass-like shape. It's simply a residential neighborhood. When we zoom in on Sonoma Plaza, we notice some interesting shapes here. So let's look at it on map view and see if we can find anything else out. You can see that these look like stick figures, and notice right here that they appear to be holding hands. And this shape over here is awfully resemblant of a swaddled infant, similar to the Town Railroad. So legend tells us that the region's native population called this area the Valley of the Moon because from certain sacred places, the moon appears to rise and set 7 times behind the peaks of the Mayakama Mountains. The name of this range should not be lost on this audience. Now, Maya, of course, can refer to the peoples of the particular culture in Latin America, but it also means the supernatural power wielded by gods and demons to produce illusions. And kama is Spanish for bed. So it is my assertion that Mayakama in this situation actually means the bed or dwelling place of a supernatural power that has the ability to produce illusions. Now, this mountain range is rich in mineral hot springs. Calistoga, California began as a resort town modeled after Saratoga Springs in New York. And there are as many geysers in these hills as there are in Yellowstone, making this a prime area for geothermal electricity. This is the largest geothermal complex in the world, called the Geysers, and it provides power for Sonoma, Lake, and Mendocino counties, along with a portion for Marin and Napa counties. And once again, we find electrical generation lurking behind the scenes of the narratives in these locations. The Sonoma area was home to world-famous author Jack London. Moving to the north of Sonoma, we find the town of Glen Ellen and the Sonoma Valley Regional Park. Now, the Sonoma Valley Regional Park has a very interesting shaped lake in it that looks a lot like a dragon with an open mouth. And adjacent to that is the Jack London State Historic Park, where we can find. Now, what we're told in his official biography is that he spent most of his fortune, along with advances on books that he never wound up writing, to acquire the property that is now the Jack London State Historic Park. He and his second wife, Charmian, purchased several ranches, combining them eventually into the 1,400-acre spread that is now Jack London State Historic Park. And Jack wasn't running around posing for photos in his underpants, and yes, I found as many photos of Jack London in his underwear as I did fully dressed. He was busy planning the construction of his beloved Wolf House. And Wolf House is quite the story. I searched high and low for construction photographs and floor plans of the Wolf House. The photograph on the left is listed as a construction photo, and indeed I do see a little bit of wood scattered around about On the right, you will find the floor plan as displayed by the State Historic Park Museum. Now, I worked for a long time in construction as a project manager, and I can assure you that this is not a complete set of plans. This is simply a floor plan. Where are the electrical schematics? Where are the plumbing schematics? Where is the central vacuum system? Now, this is allegedly Jack with the construction foreman in front of the project in progress. But do you notice the charring on the beams and the portion of the structure circled in the photo? Why does the building show distinct signs of fire damage while it is under construction? Now, construction began in 1911, and we're told that it was nearly complete. I even found one reference stating that they were to move into the house on August 23rd. Others just say they were about to move in, when it burns down suddenly on the night of August 22nd, 1913. Now, the numerology of this is intriguing with 8, 22, 19, and 13. Let's add to it with the publication of one of his last novels, The Valley of the Moon, same as the name of this area. And let's just throw in an 11 and another 22 for his death on November 22nd, 1916. Researching the real cause of death will yield many different theories and results. Officially, he died from gastrointestinal uremia, or a buildup of uric acid in the bloodstream from kidney failure. There are other reports of a morphine overdose, alcoholism, and those citing his habit of ingesting mercury. It should not be lost on the reader that he died on the same month and day as JFK. Now, whenever I see this much blatant gematria going on, I'm inclined to see what the heavens can tell me about the event in question. So let's take a quick look at the stars on the evening in question and see what clues we can find about the destruction of this building. Now, going over to Stellarium, I've taken a few screenshots to illustrate that we've got bases loaded on the fire triangle. The fire triangle consists of the three signs of Leo, Sagittarius, and Aries. Now, notice we have the sun in Leo, also signifying that the lion's gate is open at this point in time because the sun is rising in the paw of Leo. We have Jupiter in his home sign of Sagittarius, and then we have the moon in Aries. Now, that moon is 21 days old and is hanging out in the second mansion of the moon, El Butane, or the belly of Aries. By consulting the Picatrix, we can learn that this mansion was used for the following magical purposes. Quote, "When the moon passes into this mansion, the king may be approached, and if properly propitiated, his anger can be appeased, and the subject can obtain the object of his petition, or his amends will be accepted. Perhaps the king was angry, and this was the sacrifice required for the petitioner to retain his position in the king's court. Jack may have been a naughty boy. And if this is the case, then we can then look to November 22nd, 1916 to find out if this spell continues." London's death is listed as 7:45 p.m. on 11/22/1916. No autopsy was conducted, and his death was ruled uremia following renal colic on the death certificate by London's personal doctor, Dr. William Porter. Now, Jack was cremated and subsequently scattered and buried on the property, placed underneath a piece of rock too large to use on Wolf House. Now, there were rumors flying around that Jack had committed suicide. So Dr. Porter released a bulletin to the papers to quell those rumors, saying, quote, "At about 6:30 p.m., November 21st, 1916, Mr. Jack London partook of his dinner. He was taken during the night with what was supposed to be an attack of acute indigestion. This, however, proved to be a gastrointestinal type of uremia. He rapidly entered a coma and died at 7:45 p.m., November 22nd. This gives us at least a roundabout time to consult the stars. So I've attached the screenshots from Stellarium for that date at 7:45 p.m. And the heavens expose that we again have a trifecta of elements, but this time it's water. And water is the element that is symbolic of both birth and death, the cycle of life. And the water signs in this case hold 5 of the 7 planets, beginning with the Sun, Mercury, and Mars all in Scorpio. Jupiter is again in his power position in his home sign of Pisces, and then Saturn wraps it up in the destroyer of Cancer. Notice also that Mercury is combust the Sun. Now this is a significant indicator for this type of magic. Mercury represents commerce in a societal context, and the intellect and communication on an individual level. Now, Jack's living came from his ability to communicate stories, and this was symbolically burned up in the sun at the exact moment of his death in the heavens. Jupiter represents empire building on a societal level and can also signify an individual's legacy. Jupiter also rules this sign of Pisces. Now, Saturn's in the cardinal water sign of Cancer, who is the destroyer and ruled by the moon. Saturn, also known as Chronos, or time. This indicates that Jack's time is up. The moon is in Virgo and is in the 14th mansion, called the Unarmed One. This mansion's magical purpose is severance or the breaking apart of inappropriate bonds, dissolution. Their problem was solved. Jack wouldn't be allowed to be a bad boy anymore. Argentina is home to its own Valley of the Moon, and it's filled with pyramids and spheres, castle walls, and even an enormous sphinx. The official story is still wind erosion. But what do you suppose the odds are that the wind could randomly produce imagery as distinct and related to each other, as well as sites around the world? Leaving the Mayakama Mountains, we're going to head north up to Redding. Now, Redding is said to be a young city, claimed to be started by the railroad, with all of the initial land being owned by the railroad. I was just going to fly right over this area until I stumbled across this on the banks of the Sacramento River. So I found 3 very prominent features right here on the banks of the Sacramento River. Let's begin with the McConnell Arboretum and Gardens. And you're going to notice the Fibonacci spiral manicured into the gardens right off the bat. And it's got a trail leading to the Sundial Bridge and Sulphur Creek. We've seen the sulfur connection before. It's all throughout the bottom leg of the triangle that we covered in part 3B. And it's all throughout the entire west. Now, notice the appearance moving over to the Sundial Bridge of the fletching, how it looks like this is the fletching of an arrow right here for the bridge. This gives us some more arrow symbology. So the Sundial Bridge was a project that was undertaken to increase tourism to the area. They had initially allotted $3 million for this project, and they opened it up to a design contest. And this habit of doing a design contest is another feature that we keep seeing throughout the architectural history of this country. Now, they award the design to Santiago Calatrava and his design for a cantilever spar cable-stayed bridge. But this project came in at a whopping $23.5 million price tag. And if we follow the money trail, we can find that the McConnell Foundation covered the excess cost. Now, $23.5 million is an interesting figure because it's the same as the angle they say the Earth is tilted. This sundial has a gnomon, and that's the part of the sundial that casts the shadow, that is 66 meters or 217 feet tall, that points due north at a cantilevered angle of 42 degrees. The bridge opened on July 4th, 2004. Its total length is 700 feet and its total width is 23 feet. Interestingly enough, since its grand opening, the Turtle Bay Exploration Park, which is adjacent to the bridge, has seen a 42% increase in its visitation. When you look at the time and the expense devoted to this project, it would lead a rational person to conclude that the sundial is the central focal point and could be trusted as a working timepiece. But no, it makes a lot more sense to spend over $20 million on a sundial that only gives an accurate time on a single day of the year. And what is that day? The summer solstice. And that, my friends, is no accident. Just to the north of Redding, we find Mount Shasta. Now, Mount Shasta is considered to be a, quote, potentially active volcano at the southern end of the Cascade Range. It's the second highest peak in the range behind Mount Rainier, but it is the highest in volume, making it the largest volume volcano in the entire Cascade Arc. Now, Shasta also has a uniqueness about it in that it has a twin cone called Shastina, and there are currently 7 named glaciers that occupy Mount Shasta. Now, the last known eruption, they say, occurred around 1250 AD. But there's historical data that says that it erupted as late as 1786. Well, the Smithsonian came in and performed radiocarbon dating, and they claim to have discredited the first-hand accounts of the 1786 eruption and assert that the 1250 AD date is correct via their radiocarbon dating. Now, the indigenous population referred to Shasta as the White Ones, or the Great White Mountain, and believed that the spirit being named Skell, or God of the Air, was the mountain. They viewed Shasta as a living being, not just the abode of a spirit being, but that the mountain itself was actually Skell. And I find it fascinating that they call him the God of the Air, and in the zodiac, Aquarius is the God of the Air, which is the age that we're entering into. Now, notice also on the overhead view, the satellite view of the area, that we've got distinct checkerboard patterns being created by the logging industry. And I live in logging territory, and they don't do that around where I live. So I'm wondering if it is a deliberate pattern around Mount Shasta and this area for an intentional purpose. So there's a lot that we could talk about Shasta, but we're going to focus our attention on the magical lore that surrounds this area. So let's begin with theosophy figure Guy Ballard. This guy right down here posing with his wife. Now, the story goes that sometime in the late 1920s or early 30s, he is hiking around Mount Shasta when he rounds a bend and Saint Germain is standing there waiting to greet him. Ballard has this lengthy conversation with this apparition of Saint Germain, who explains to him that he is one of the many ascended masters. Now, after this experience, he begins a channeled relationship with Germain, which turns into the I Am movement. They used Shasta to hold many retreats and events, particularly through the 1970s. Next up are the Lemurians, who are alleged to be living inside and underneath the mountain. Now, Lemuria is the second lost continent, lesser known than that of Atlantis, They are differing in location. Atlantis is in the Atlantic Ocean, and Lemuria, or Mu, depending on the time and map being consulted, is placed always in the Pacific and Indian Oceans. The borders of Lemuria are different depending on which person you're reading and which map you're looking at. And there are even those who contend that California itself was actually a part of Lemuria. And then there are others that claim that the Lemurians, when their continent was descending beneath the waves, they were able to escape and come to California. Now, Lemurians are considered by many researchers to predate Atlantis and to be the original advanced civilization of Earth. Much of the writing on the mystic village aspect of the Lemurians being located underneath Shasta stems from the work of Frederick Spencer Oliver, who wrote A Dweller on Two Planets. This is also a channeled work. But before you dismiss this book as more theosophical psyop rubbish, just consider for just a minute that there are dozens of tech predictions made in this book. Now, he wrote this book in the 1880s. He actually began writing it in 83, completed it in 84, and it was not published until 89. But those predictions have come to pass in the decades and century following its publication. Now, these theories were presented by every major paper in the country, including the New York Times, the Chicago Tribune, and some of them dedicating, like the Chicago Tribune that I have shown here, entire special edition sections in the Sunday paper to this topic. The Rosicrucians also give a detailed exploration of the lore of Mount Shasta, and they reported in their August 1925 edition of the Mystic Triangle about these phenomena. Now, Salvius, which is a pseudonym for an unknown person, he explores the stories of the strange sights recorded both by inhabitants of the area and visitors to the mountain. And these stories go back as long as anyone can remember, all the way back to the indigenous peoples that live in the area. Now, he discovers that locals are fairly hesitant to talk about it, and that though they have tried various methods of approach in exploring the mountain, they're loath to speak to anyone outside of the area about them. Salvius tells us that the mystic community performs a ceremony every day at midnight. Now, when he says the mystic community, he's referring to the Lemurians, and that they have this ceremony that they do at midnight each night, and then they have ceremonies that take place as well during the day and other times of the month for special events. And that it creates these lights that can be seen, casting an eerie glow on the mountain. And he reports that these lights are seen regularly by passengers and crew both aboard the Shasta Limited, which ran between San Francisco and Portland. Now, the ceremony of thanks that occurred at midnight was supposed to celebrate their arrival on this continent after their own disappeared beneath the waters of the Pacific Ocean. Now, he gives an account of their history, stating that they were a highly developed civilization that is hard for us to comprehend from our present point of view. His examples of their superior technology include an analysis of a recent wildfire that had threatened so many parts of California. And around Mount Shasta and on Mount Shasta, this fire was at an uncontrollable status. And that the Lemurians raised a wall of invisible protection between them and the fire. He even goes on to say that the lines of demarcation were clearly visible in the carnage. Now, they're alleged to have a central temple that is visible to those who succeed in penetrating from the outer forest into the inner forest, and that it is constructed of delicately carved onyx and marble. And that these Lemurians are often seen sailing in their strange boats that have neither sail nor smokestacks. in the Pacific Ocean, and that when they reach the shoreline, the boats take off and sail through the air, only to drop again on Mount Shasta. Now, one of the most credible witnesses we have of both the temple and these boats sailing on the ocean and flying through the air is from Professor Edgar Lewson Larkin. And he was the tenured director of the Mount Low Echo Observatory. Now, he wrote about and was interviewed about his observations of the temple and the lights and the ships through his telescope pointed at Mount Shasta. So he made direct observations through that telescope that he had at the observatory, a phenomenon that we would probably classify as UFO activity today. But here's the problem. Mount Low is 544 miles away from Shasta. So either this professor is a bold-faced liar, and he's willing to destroy his career over tales of Lemurians that he had no way of being able to see due to the curvature of the earth, or the flat earth community better grab this one and run with it. Now, these stories continue to be echoed by thousands of researchers and visitors to Mount Shasta today. Now, they may have more of a UFO slant to their accounts, but what it seems to me is that the suspected causation morphs with time to fit whatever cultural narrative is in play. So during this older era, people were studying and learning about Lemuria, while 21st century people are all about aliens. So the truth, I would say that Lemuria is closer and would give a terrestrial explanation for a lot of UFO activity. So wrapping up this episode, I leave you with the story of a guy who gave up his entire career and 40 years of his life to study a shack in the mountains of Oregon. So just outside of Medford is the small town of Gold Hill. It was a flash in the pan of the Oregon gold rush. The town is located at the bottom of a mountain with a large wash. You can see that wash coming down right here. Now, this is where the miners hunted for runoff nuggets and black sand deposits that washed out every year. There were a series of mines that operated in this particular location, but all of them shut down operations for one reason or another. The last mine to run out there was the Gray Eagle. And in 1904, they built an assay shack that wound up being abandoned when the mine was closed in 1909. Now, somewhere around 1911, prospectors had reported that the shack had slipped off of its foundation and was leaning to the side. It was pretty much forgotten, and we can fast forward to 1914, where a prospector named William McCullough was in the area and discovered the nearly collapsed shack. Now, whatever he experienced during this exploration of the area was enough for him to convince his friend, John Litster, a Scottish engineer and geologist, to travel all the way from Scotland to Oregon to investigate this shack. Now, what Litster found was enough to cause him to purchase the land surrounding the shack, leave his career and the life he had built in Scotland, and spend the next 40 years investigating the magnitude of the vortex his friend had stumbled upon. Now, in 1930, he opened the area as an attraction, not just to bring in needed funds to continue his research, but he actually used the people who visited in his experiments. He recorded astounding differences in the way that the vortex phenomena of this location reacted from one group to the next, even to the point of singling out members of the group with even rarer displays of the paranormal. Now, John found that the vortex was a circular area with overlapping smaller vortices. The most common displays of the paranormal were changes in mass, orientations of mass, defiance of the known laws of gravity, and temporal disturbances. He recorded visitors phasing in and out with part of them becoming distorted or fuzzy compared to the rest of them. Watches kept time differently within the vortex, and glimpses into other realms or timelines had been reported regularly by both staff and visitors alike. Now, Lister successfully measured what he called terra lines or ley lines and described them as oscillating frequencies that caused a person to sway in a rotary movement when standing on the intersection of the north, south, and east-west lines. Now, John Lister died on December 4th, 1959, and his will directed his wife Mildred to destroy all of his research, citing, "The world is not ready for these things." Now, Mildred sold the Oregon Vortex to the Cooper family, who are now at their third generation of ownership. So what did John Lister discover that was so frightening that he would destroy 40 years of research? Perhaps it was the very thing that he didn't realize was already being used against us: the manipulation of timelines through temporal anomalies. Or maybe it's possible that all of that is just a lie, and all of his research wound up landing in the hands of someone else. Much love, you guys. I'll see you next time in part 4B.